स्तवैर् वेदैः सङ्गोपक्रमोपनिषदैर् गायन्ति जं सामगा ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति जं योगिनः यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमो नमः। Our salutations to that Supreme Being who is one without a second, whom the sages call by various names. Our salutations to Him, whose glory has been sung through the rapturous hymns of the scriptures of the world, but whose limitless and infinite glory none can comprehend. But again, whom the sages and devotees realize within their hearts in their deepest contemplation, Him we salute again and again. May He shine in our hearts, manifest therein all His glory, and dispel all darkness and ignorance. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. I shall try to speak to you this morning on Holy Mother, Sri Sarada Devi, the divine consort of Sri Ramakrishna. It is very difficult to review her life because she lived a life in silence, and in silence she awakened the spiritual consciousness of hundreds and thousands of men and women. There are a few books now written about her life and teachings, but in my understanding, there is no written word or spoken word that can do justice to the life and teachings of Holy Mother. You see, an ordinary philosopher, he can talk big, but in his life, he lives, perhaps he lives rightly, but still not equal to the ideal that he sets forth before himself. But a great illumined teacher and a divine incarnation at that, he is far greater than his teachings because he cannot express the whole truth. But as I said, in silence they give the truth. Now again, you see, what I am talking now is not only about our Holy Mother, but it applies to all divine incarnations like Krishna or Christ or Buddha or Ramakrishna. You live with a divine incarnation. Suppose you are living at the time of Christ and you live with Him. And you live with Him intimately. you see the human side. Very sweet, wonderful. You feel their love, that is wonderful. But then, you do not yet realize or understand the divinity that is in Christ until He transfigures Himself or reveals Himself to you. So, in order to understand a Christ or a Krishna, a Holy Mother or Ramakrishna, the best way to understand, at least we can get a divine glimpse, a glimpse of their divine power and glory, if we meditate. If we meditate on the personality, and when vision comes, when there comes the vision, you see, please understand that these great divine incarnations are still living. They are still living. You can have the vision of Christ, you can have the vision of Krishna, you can have the vision of Ramakrishna, you can have the vision of Holy Mother. Yes. And when that vision comes, there you see a glimpse, I'd say, even there also, you see a glimpse of their divinity. Now, in this connection, I will mention to you Krishna and his friend Arjuna. They're close friends, intimate friends, lived together for years. And Arjuna loved Krishna, and Krishna loved Arjuna. And then at long last, when that vision was given to Arjuna by Krishna, then his whole view of life changed, and his understanding of Krishna also changed. So I shall read out to you what Arjuna says after that vision of universal form that he had. Arjuna says, carelessly I called you Krishna, and my comrade took undying God for friend and fellow mortal, overbold with love, unconscious of your greatness. Often I'd jest, familiar as we feasted midst the throng, or walked or lay at rest together. Did my words offend? Forgive me, Lord eternal. Author of the world, the unmoved and the moving, you alone are fit for worship, you the highest. Where in the three worlds shall any find your equal? Therefore, I bow down, prostrate, and ask for pardon. Now forgive me, God. As friend forgives his comrade, father forgives son, and man his dearest lover. You see, his whole understanding of Krishna changed. Now again, there is another side to it again. And this, the human side also is very sweet, very wonderful. I give you the illustration of the gopis, the shepherdess girls of Vrindavan, and their relationship with Krishna. It is said that these gopis, in their previous birth, were great saints and sages. They had attained the realization and experience of impersonal Brahman. But they wanted to taste the sweetness of God playing as a human being. And so they were born as gopis. Now it happened one day that Sri Krishna said to them, now come along with me to the river Jamuna. And as you dive in the river, you will have some experience. And tell me about it. So they went and dived. And as they dived, of course, that experience of Krishna as the impersonal Brahman, with all his divine glories, they experienced. Then Yashoda, the foster mother of Krishna, she said to Krishna, Krishna, I don't want that vision. I want to hold you as my baby. There's a greater sweetness in that. You see, so again there are both sides to it. Now, of course, you see, perhaps I may be making a little too esoteric. So I shall come down and tell you about her life. You see, when I met her in her later years. And one thing that I saw in her was this, that no human being, an avatar, a Krishna or a Christ or a Ramakrishna or a Buddha, was worshipped during the lifetime as Holy Mother was worshipped. You see, hundreds and thousands would worship her as the living goddess. And in the history of the religious movements of the world, I do not know of any individual, a Christ or a Krishna or a Ramakrishna or a Buddha, none was worshipped like that during their lifetime. Yes, a few individuals. But Holy Mother was literally worshipped as a living goddess. And yet, as you see her, as you meet her, she was just your mother, a country woman. Now, of course, in this connection again about how she was worshipped as a living goddess, there were funny incidents also, along with that. I'll just mention one. An old Brahmin, he came to visit Holy Mother. And of course, in Calcutta, Holy Mother used to cover her face and cover her whole body. And only the feet you could see. And so this old man sat in front of her in meditation posture. And now it was a summer day and Mother was perspiring. And this fellow went on meditating before her, practicing breathing exercises and just as you'd offer worship, ritualistic worship before an image, And fortunately, after a while, there was Mother's attendant, Golapma. She was a character. She would protect Mother. And so she comes and drags out this man and says, what is this? Do you think our Mother is an image and you have to make the image alive? You see, such funny incidents also would happen, but Mother was unconcerned. One time again, a fellow came and just struck his forehead on the big toe of Holy Mother in such a way that it pained Mother. And that fellow said, I did that purposely so that Mother would remember that pain and remember me. tell you how I first met her. I was about 14 years old then. A friend of mine and I were walking. We were going out for a walk to breathe the pure air of a lake, you know. That's what in India we do in the evenings. And you see, my hometown is the place where Holy Mother had to come. There was a railway station there. And then from there she had to go to her village. Her village was within 20 miles from our hometown. Now, you know, in every district in Bengal again, there is a dialect, special dialect. And the dialect that Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna spoke, you see, that was our dialect. That's how our mother also spoke. And as we were going out for a walk, we saw a holy man in Gedua cloth, you know, seated on the porch of an inn, and some women surrounding him. And so, as we watched the holy man and saw these women, you know, we made fun and criticized the holy man, saying, look, he's a holy man and he's surrounded by women. And so we went out for a walk. Then as we were coming back, we saw the same group. And then, you know, I felt that I must go and find out. But you see, I also talked critically about the whole situation. And so I didn't want to let this boy know that I'd like to visit them. So when this boy went to his own house and I was supposed to go to my house, I came back. And then I prostrated before this holy man and he said, how would you like to see Holy Mother? I said, you mean Paramahansa's wife? And she was just seated near, you know. And he said, yes, there, bow down. So, as I was bowing down, she said, son, haven't I seen you before? I said, of course, no, I never saw you, or I don't think you ever saw me. You see, a young 14-year-old boy, he didn't realize that mother recognizes her sons, her children, but the children don't recognize the mother. And then, you know, in our country, the mothers show their affection to their children, to the sons, by, you know, they don't kiss directly, but they put their fingers on the chin of the son and then kiss those fingers. And that's what mother did to show the affection. And then you see, I was attracted to the very name of Maharaj, Rakhal, in the gospel as I read. But when Holy Mother would be in Calcutta, and I was a student in Calcutta, every week, once a week, the men would be allowed to come and touch her feet. And of course there would be hundreds, you know, standing in rows from upstairs of the house through the gate to one block of the city of Calcutta. And I'd go every week. Not that I had any great reverence for her, but because I always had an interesting experience as I touched her toes. As if I touched a live wire. And my fingers would just move like that. But not unpleasant. It was pleasant experience. And so I just go to have that experience. Then of course I realized later in my life that that's how they transmit spirituality, transmit the spiritual power. Then you see, I was already a disciple of Swami Brahmananda. And then I had another friend. I didn't join the monastery yet. Then I had another friend who also joined the monastery later. But he was to take his initiation from Maharaj, and he did take later. So both of us went to visit Holy Mother in her home, in her village. And you see, when you go to her in her village, she didn't have veil or anything like that. She would be just like your mother. And, we arrived at a time, rather inconvenient time in a sense. You see, we didn't have any sense. We didn't let her know, and there was no telephone. And I don't think any letter she would receive unless a week had passed, you see. It was a village. But anyway, when we arrived, then later her attendant told us that two of Rakhal's sons, you see, Rakhal was Swami Brahmananda, will be coming, and so she saved food for two of us. And then she served on leaf plates. And then she sat by us and talked to us, not anything about religion or anything, I can't remember what she talked about, but just as a mother would sit by the sons and talk. The same way, we felt that real mother. And then you see, after we had finished our meal, we are going to take off the plates, the leaf plates, to clean up the place. And mother says, "What are you going to do?" And then I said, "Well, we don't want to keep this way. We'd like to clean up." Then she remarked, "Would you do that if your mother were present in your own home?" So he left them. And mother herself cleaned those plates. And you see, one thing that many of the monks told me, that to each one, mother looked like very much similar. Very much, there was a great likeness between her and one's own mother. And so you could see that mother in her. Last I saw her in physical body after I joined the monastery. She was in Calcutta, and we are going to Himalayas, and so my master, he said to me, "Go and accept blessings from mother." So I went, and then there are not many, just three of us. We are going to the Himalayas. We went to see Holy Mother. And then she didn't have any veil covering her face or anything. She was in the shrine room, and there was a bed for her in the shrine room. She lived in the shrine room in Calcutta. And then she offered a flower to us, and the same way showed her affection. And that was the last I saw her in physical body. And you see, of course, the flower, as soon as it got dried up, I threw away. Now let me tell you how Swami Prabhavananda, felt about her. He said about her that mother was all the time, incessantly, he was in transcendental consciousness. And though she was in samadhi, in that transcendental consciousness, all the time, she again appeared normally and acted and behaved very normally. That was the something that was unique. And Swamiji, he was himself such a great soul, an illumined soul who had attained his highest samadhi. And when he would go to visit Holy Mother, He would dip himself in the Ganges many times, thinking that he was not pure enough to touch the feet of Mother. But you see, we didn't realize. But these disciples of Ramakrishna, how they looked upon her. There was one disciple, for instance, Swami Yogananda, who was her attendant for many years, as long as he lived. And, he would not even touch her feet. But where she would be standing after she moved away, she would go and bow his head on that ground, because that ground became holy to him. And my master Maharaj, for instance, when he would go to visit Holy Mother, he would just go like a little boy, and just playful boy, and Mother might chide him, and so he would go there a little nervous and bow down and run away. And because they saw the Divine Mother, the Mother of the universe in her. Swami Turiyananda told at one time, from a psychological or from a yogic standpoint, he explained that Mother, with great difficulty, keeps her mind in the Vishuddha center in the throat. You see, there are spiritual centers in the body. And you see, your spiritual life begins when your mind, consciousness rises to the center of the heart. And then when it rises to the center in the throat, you see, you are established in purity, and all the time you have the constant recollectedness of God. And then when it goes between the eyebrows, you attain sabikalpa, the lower samadhi. You see the God in his personal aspect. Then when it goes there, you see him in his impersonal aspect, oneness with God. And Mother, with great difficulty, used to bring her consciousness down to the center called the Vishuddha or throat center. And Swami Turiyananda, who himself was a Brahmajnani, a knower of Brahman, he said, with difficulty we have to raise our consciousness there, to keep there all the time. You see, such was Holy Mother. And these disciples recognized that in her. Of course, I'll mention one incident, how she received the Western disciples. One time, she said she had a vision. And she saw the Western disciples having the photo of Ramakrishna, and also with great love placing her photo beside him. She had that vision at one time. Now, of course, what I'm going to relate to you may not sound very strange to you, because unless you know the customs of the country, it may not appear anything very great. But the fact is this, that she was an orthodox Brahmin, you see, very orthodox class. And that means very careful about eating food, touched by others. Now Swami Vivekananda brought these disciples and introduced them to Holy Mother. And Holy Mother gave them sweets to eat in one plate. And these women devotees from the West were having their, eating the sweets from the plate, same plate. And Swamiji was standing there watching. And suddenly Holy Mother placed her fingers upon the plate, took a sweet and began to eat. And that even gave a shock to Swamiji. But That way, Holy Mother made them understand that she accepted them as their own daughters. I shall tell you her life summary. You see, she was married to Sri Ramakrishna when she was very young, like just a child, 6 years old. And then when she was 14, that was the first time that she was conscious that she was meeting her husband. When Sri Ramakrishna came from Dakshineshwar to Kamarpukur, Holy Mother came to visit him. And at that period, Sri Ramakrishna initiated her. And she was the first disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. And Mother said, her experience, her heart was like a brimful jar filled with inexpressible joy. And this continued. Then, you see, Sri Ramakrishna again went away to Dakshineshwar, and Holy Mother went back to her parents' home in Jairambati. And then rumors began to come that Ramakrishna has gone crazy, And so when she was 18, when these rumors got to her ears, she couldn't believe it, of course, but she wanted to go and meet. So she told her father. And her father, they were poor people. They couldn't afford any carriage or anything, and there was no train at this time. And so they were walking about, I don't know exactly how many miles, but at least 80 to 100 miles. And then, as they were walking, of course, Holy Mother was not used to walking that long distance. She suddenly got sick with high fever. And so they stopped overnight in an inn, and Holy Mother had the vision of a young girl, her own age, come to her and placing her hand on her body, and there's no more any fever. And then Mother asked her, who is she? Who are you? And she said, I'm your sister, and I live at Dakshineshwar. Oh, then you know my husband. Yes, I'm keeping him for you. So that was the vision. Then she was all right, and she arrived. She reached Dakshineshwar, and Sri Ramakrishna welcomed her most affectionately. And during this period, Holy Mother told Sri Ramakrishna, I have come to help you in your spiritual path, not to drag you down. And Sri Ramakrishna later remarked, if she had not been so good and pure, I don't know if I could have remained pure myself. And during this period, Sri Ramakrishna worshipped Holy Mother as Divine Mother, as Mother Kali. And it happened this way. You can, if you ever go to India and to the Belud Math, you will still see the platform, or rather a sort of table, low table, upon which Holy Mother was seated when Sri Ramakrishna was worshipped, when Sri Ramakrishna worshipped her. Anyway, it was the Kali Puja night. And Sri Ramakrishna asked his attendant to make preparation with all paraphernalia for worship of Mother Kali. And so it was done. But there was no image, no picture or anything, just there was the little table. And then Sri Ramakrishna sent word to Holy Mother to come. And she came, but as she entered the room, she was semi-conscious. And she got into an ecstatic state. That's how she was semi-conscious. And then Sri Ramakrishna asked her to go and be seated there. And then Sri Ramakrishna began to offer her the worship. And then Sri Ramakrishna went into Samadhi and Holy Mother went into Samadhi. And so this is my interpretation, that beyond the physical consciousness, in the supreme state of consciousness, they had their union in spirit. And then Sri Ramakrishna offered at her feet the effects of all his spiritual practices. Now again, she was back to Jairambati, her village, and then again as she was coming with pilgrims, many other women and men. And they had to cross, on their way, they had to cross a place which was infested with you see, gangsters, robbers. We call dacoits. But you can get the word better if I say gangster. And now Holy Mother couldn't keep company with this group, and she realized that they were getting a little worried and anxious, and so she said to them, "You go ahead, don't wait for me, you go ahead, I will come slowly." And then it got dark. And then she saw a man with a big stick approaching her. And she immediately knew that was a dacoit. So she talks to him and says, "Father, I am your daughter. I am going to see my husband who lives at Dakshineshwar. And it is dark." And then came this man's wife. And as she came, she goes and touches her and says, "Mother, I am your daughter." And something happened. Of course, we don't know what happened. But these two people saw something in her. That's what they say. Of course, we don't know. But the idea is that they perhaps saw the divine mother in her. But anyway, they became so gentle, kind, and they call her Sarada, my daughter, our daughter. And they took her with them on the way to Dakshineshwar, and then prepared food for her. Took some peas, gathered peas from the field, and with puffed rice and these peas gave her to eat. And then they accompanied her until she was placed with the group of people. And then, you see, this couple again went and visited Sri Ramakrishna. And of course their whole lives were transformed. And mother sometimes laughingly said, well, in their past years, they did murder also. They did commit murder also and committed dacoities. But their whole lives were transformed. Then again, you see, when Sri Ramakrishna was sick, she nursed him. And after the passing away, I'm just giving you the highlights. After the passing away of the master, as is the custom, she was going to dress like a widow, because in India, widows dress a little different. They don't have any ornaments or jewelry, and they don't wear any cloth that is, the sari that is rather a very attractive sari they don't wear. They just wear white and no border to it. And Holy Mother was going to do that, especially when she was going to take away her bracelets. There's a very interesting story about these bracelets. Sri Ramakrishna was a priest, and he used to get, I think 10 rupees a month. 10 rupees, how much? $2 a month. And he saved money to order bracelets, gold bracelets for Holy Mother. And I think he spent 200 rupees, which would be about, say, $40. And had those bracelets made for her. You can, if you go to India, you can see those bracelets. You see, it is said that Sri Ramakrishna saw in a vision Sita, the wife of Rama. And Sri Ramakrishna saw bracelets in the arms of Sita. And Sri Ramakrishna ordered, he drew the pattern to make the same kind for Holy Mother. And so as she was going to take away these bracelets, Sri Ramakrishna comes and holds her by the arm and says, "What are you doing? I'm not dead. It's just going from one room to another, that's all." And so she never appeared like a widow. Now, of course, you see one thing about her, she made no distinction between sinner and saint. Even while Sri Ramakrishna was living, though she obeyed him in every respect, but not in one thing. For instance, it happened this way. There used to come to visit her one woman who just lived promiscuously when she was young. And she used to come and visit Holy Mother. And Sri Ramakrishna said, "Don't associate with that woman." And Mother said, "No, look here. I cannot obey you in that. She is also my daughter." And that was her attitude. You see, every man was her son and every woman was her daughter. And not mere name, but actually she felt that affection for everybody. There was one Mohammedan who also lived a very life like a gangster. And he would come and bring, he had great respect for Holy Mother, so he would bring vegetables and fruits sometimes to Holy Mother, and then Holy Mother would feed him. One time, you see, the girls in the family were asked to give him food, and they were throwing things at him because they didn't want even to, look at him, because they thought he was so bad, he was so wicked. And Holy Mother watched it, and she scolded them and began to offer him food herself, and said to these girls, "Now look here, he's as much my son as Swami Sarada, who was attendant of Holy Mother." And of course, in Christ's life, or in the life of Ramakrishna, or in the life of Buddha, you see, how the sinners were transformed into saints. But only few instances you see. For instance, in Christ's life, only of Mary Magdalene. In the life of Buddha, you know of one, whose invitations Buddha accepted and got food poisoning, and he died of that. And then again, in the life of Ramakrishna, you see G.C. Ghosh and the actresses of that time. Some of them would come, and how their lives were transformed. Now, in this connection again, another very interesting incident comes to my mind. It's getting time. There was one Hindu gentleman who came to the United States years ago, And then he went and met Professor Max Muller, and Professor Max Muller was at the time writing the life of Sri Ramakrishna. And so this Max Muller asked this gentleman, because he had met Ramakrishna, about Ramakrishna. And he said Yes, he was a saint, but later, he got associated. He became associated with these prostitute girls, they would come to him. And, Professor Max Muller jumped and said, now I know he is the divine incarnation. You see, the result, the effect was just the opposite. And in Holy Mother's life, she transformed the lives of many, many people of that time. Now, I'll just about her teachings. You see, she taught the essentials of religion. And what is the essential of religion? To realize God. I'll just quote to you a few teachings. She says, if one loves the Lord, he becomes steady in meditation, and he clearly sees the Lord in his own heart and hears his voice. And then he sees him in every creature, and that makes him truly humble. God is one's very own. It is the eternal relationship. One realizes him in proportion to the intensity of one's love for him. Then she says, one makes the mold, many images are made from that mold. You see, a divine incarnation is like that mold. And just by loving the divine incarnation, you are also in that mold. Her last words, which she emphasized often, were these. I tell you one thing, if you want peace of mind, do not find fault with others. No one is a stranger, my child. The whole world is your own. Now, before I conclude, I'd like to read out to you one letter that Sister Nivedita, who was very intimate with Holy Mother, and Sister Nivedita wrote this letter to Holy Mother from Cambridge, Massachusetts. She was visiting the United States. And she writes, Beloved Mother, this morning early, I went to church to pray for Sarah. Mrs. Bull was sick at the time, Sarah Bull. All the people there were thinking of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And suddenly I thought of you. Your dear face and your loving look and your white sari and your bracelets. It was all there. And it seemed to me that yours was the presence that was to soothe and bless poor Sarah's sick room. And do you know, I thought I'd been foolish. I'd been very foolish to sit in your room at the evening service to Sri Ramakrishna trying to meditate. Why did I not understand that it was quite enough to be a little child at your dear feet? Dear Mother, you are full of love. And it is not a flushed and violent love like ours and like the world's, but a gentle peace that brings good to everyone and wishes ill to none. It is a golden radiance full of play. What a blessed Sunday that was a few months ago when I ran into you, the last thing before I went on the Ganges, and ran back to you for a moment as soon as I came back. I felt such a wonderful freedom in the blessing you gave me and in your welcome home. Dearest Mother, I wish we could send you a wonderful hymn or a prayer, but somehow even that would seem too loud, too full of noise. Surely you are the most wonderful thing of God, Sri Ramakrishna's own chalice of his love for the world. a token left with his children in these lonely days. And we should be very still and quiet before you, except indeed for a little fun. Surely, the wonderful things of God are all quiet, stealing unnoticed into our lives. The air and the sunlight and the sweetness of gardens and of the Ganges. These are the silent things that are like you. Do send to poor Sarada the mantle of your peace. Isn't your thought now and then of the high calm that neither loves nor hates? Isn't that a sweet benediction that trembles in God like the dewdrop on the lotus leaf and touches not the world ever, my darling mother, your foolish cookie baby? Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya Abir Maidhi Rudrajate Dakshinang Mukhang Tena Mang Pahi Nityam. Om. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from death to immortality. Lead us from darkness to light. Light us through and through and guide us evermore with thy loving presence. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace.